Thriving or dying? What exactly is the status of Major League Baseball in 2023? 20 years ago, if you looked at all the data, it all pointed to a booming league. Since then, all signs were pointing to a league that was slowly losing its life, though it seemed like maybe a 100-year process. This year it got confusing because some numbers point to a dangerous acceleration of that decline. Others point to a rebound and possible return to glory. This was a very important year for MLB. Attendance at the ballparks had been on the decline almost every year since 2008. Ticket sales across the league had declined by millions, and though some teams were still doing fine, for some others attendance was getting embarrassingly low. Ratings were suffering too. The top 10 lowest rated World Series ever have all occurred in the last 15 years. MLB postseason games getting beaten in the ratings by regular season NFL games had become the norm. So, with fewer people attending every year and fewer people watching from home every year, it meant an eventual death, unless something happened to reverse the decline. A professional sports league can't survive without those two things. The decrease in attendance and viewership coincided with the increasing length of the games. In an age where people are spending less time watching sports and have shorter attention spans, baseball games were taking over 3 hours on average, longer times between pitches, more pitching changes, so the time between the action was longer, and the action was also on the decline. Hitters were getting fewer hits than ever, stolen bases were becoming rare, the game was getting long and boring, and no wonder the crowds were getting smaller. So this season some changes were introduced. The pitch clock was introduced to speed up the pace of play. Limits on defensive shifts, bigger bases, and limited pickoff attempts resulted in more hits, more extra base hits, and more steals. Lots of other little changes too. In 2023 we saw a faster game with more action on the field. With the speeding up of the game, I predicted when the season began that it would give a boost to the ratings. Fans would stay tuned in longer if there was more action on the field happening at a quicker pace. They're more likely to watch till the end if it's 2.5 hours versus more than 3. I also predicted that it would have little to no effect on attendance, though it could have an effect in the long run. With people watching more games at home, they're more likely to want to catch a game live in the future, but that takes time to build up. I didn't think it would happen right away. And boy was I wrong. It didn't play out at all like I thought it would. The rule changes went over well. Seemed a little weird at first having a pitch clock, but fans quickly got used to it, and most fans are happy with the changes. So that part was a success. The unexpected part was seeing a huge increase in attendance right away. Right from the start of the season, teams across the league were seeing more fans in the stands. By the end of the season, 26 of the 30 teams had seen an increase in attendance, even some of the really bad teams. The average attendance of 29,114 across the league in 2023 was the highest seen since 2017, an increase of about 2,600 fans per game compared with the 2022 season. Of course, it was higher than the 2020 and 2021 seasons, and many expected an increase over last year's figures. But it's really surprising that attendance figures for 2023 beat 2 pre-COVID seasons. In the last 15 years, this is the first time regular season attendance was higher than it was 5 years earlier. As I suggested on a mid-season video I did on this topic, there were a few factors that might have given a special boost to the attendance this season. One is that this may have been sort of a make-up season in terms of attendance. What I mean is people couldn't go to games in 2020, attendance was restricted in 2021, and the 2022 season was threatened by a players' strike that delayed the start of the season, and fans didn't make arrangements to go to the ballpark because they weren't sure if the season was even going to happen. This year, perhaps, every fan who would have gone to a game in the last 3 years rushed out to the ballpark this season. Another reason may have been the WBC in March. It was an exciting event, got higher ratings than any past WBC, way higher. And most people in America don't live anywhere near Arizona or Florida, so they couldn't see the WBC in person. But they could go see the nearest Major League ball club as soon as the season started, and the Major League season started just weeks after the WBC ended. That would help explain the surge in attendance at the start of the season, but the large increase in attendance lasted all year, not just in April. So while the WBC may have contributed to the increase, it surely wasn't the sole driver of it. Or maybe it was the rule changes. Fans decided if the game is going to have more action and only last 2.5 hours, they were going to go attend one in person. Could be the schedule too. There were more interleague games, a wider variety of matchups, and fewer times seeing the same old division opponents. So there may have been more fans coming to see the visiting team rather than the home team. No matter the reason, it was nice to see attendance recover so well. The real test will be next year. No WBC, nothing special going on at the start of the season. No further rule changes, nothing major anyway. The pitch clock will be a year old, the game will look the same as it did the year before, and if the attendance surge was due to people just not being able to go the last few years, they will have gotten it out of their system. All that seems to point to lower attendance in 2024. But if attendance remains the same or goes up, that'll be a huge victory for MLB. It'll mean it wasn't just a one-year thing, and attendance is heading in the right direction. So MLB is thriving, right? Attendance is at a 6-year high. There must be more people watching from their homes, right? Nope. Higher attendance and higher ratings usually go hand in hand. 20 years ago, attendance was on the rise, ratings were on the rise. 10 years ago, attendance was on the decline, ratings were on the decline. But as good as attendance was this year, that's how bad the ratings were. It didn't start out that way. At the start of the season, ratings were up for national broadcasts. It seemed like the rule changes were having the positive effect the league had been hoping for. But in the summer, that all turned around. Ratings were disappointing the rest of the way. TBS, for example, at the mid-season point, was seeing a 41% increase over the 2022 ratings for their Tuesday night games. By the end of the season, the gains had almost entirely been erased. TBS finished the season with a mere 4% increase over their 2022 ratings. When Rob Manfred says that ratings are up nationally this year, he fails to mention the dramatic rise and fall they experienced. But no one was too worried about it. During the regular season, attendance is what matters. TV ratings aren't really a big deal until the postseason comes around. And with attendance shooting up in stadiums across the country, from the start till the end of the season, it was expected that the postseason ratings would see a boost. But the ratings for the postseason were terrible. The Wild Card and Division Series both saw ratings declines. League Championship Series ratings were good. But then came the World Series. The 3 previous World Series, from 2020 to 2022, were the 3 lowest rated World Series ever. So this year, they actually would have been somewhat satisfied if they had the 4th lowest ratings ever. But what we got was the least watched World Series in the 55 years since they started keeping track. The 2020 series was the worst one, and it was understandable why it was. MLB had just played a 60-game season in empty stadiums. So many people didn't see it as a real championship, and there were a lot of other things going on in the country that could make people easily forget about baseball for a while. 2021, ratings improved. Second worst ever, but still an improvement. 2022 ratings were a little higher, 3rd worst ever. Nothing to brag about, but at least for 2 consecutive years, ratings were heading in the right direction. Then this year's World Series ratings were a disaster. It would have helped if the series had gone more than 5 games, but that can't be used as an excuse. Game 1 of this year's World Series was the least watched Game 1 ever. It was followed by the lowest ever rated Game 2, Game 3, and Game 4. Only Game 5 was not a record low. So, from the very beginning of this year's World Series, it was historically the worst for ratings. One big problem was that most popular teams had down years. The Cardinals and Mets had really bad seasons. A lot of their fans probably tuned out around mid-season, about the time the ratings decline started. Yankees and Red Sox both missed the postseason, so the 2 biggest fan bases lost interest once the regular season ended. Dodgers and Braves both won 100 games, and they were in the postseason, but both were eliminated in the division series, and we were left with the Diamondbacks in the World Series, an unpopular team that doesn't draw good ratings. This is nothing new what I'm saying here. Everybody's been saying if only the Dodgers had made it instead of the D-backs, ratings would have been alright. Every professional sports league deals with this to some degree. In any given year, they'd love to have New York versus Los Angeles, or some kind of matchup like that. Ratings are better when you have that. But it's especially the case with Major League Baseball. As baseball has become more of a local sport rather than a national sport, it's become increasingly reliant on its big markets. And you cannot say a league is in good shape when that's the case. MLB has 30 teams, hoping to have 32 soon, and it seems like MLB needs one of just a handful of teams to reach the World Series in order for it to be a rating success. That is a problem. But attendance is up, and which one is more important? Attendance. If this becomes a trend where attendance continues to rise and ratings keep declining, we may see a future where MLB teams enjoy great popularity in their local markets, but it's not televised nationally, or hardly at all anyway. And I don't know if baseball can continue to thrive locally if its national exposure goes away. On the positive side, a continued upward trend could lead to higher ratings in the future. If more people are attending games consistently, it's safe to assume that the teams are gaining more fans. So if teams like the Rays and Diamondbacks can grow their fan bases, first with more people going to the games, then more people tuning in from home, maybe in the future a World Series matchup between those two wouldn't be such a ratings disaster. Right now there's such a big gap in team popularity from the top to the bottom. Some teams average over 40,000 fans per game, others can't even get 20,000. We shouldn't be surprised when that reflects in the ratings. But 26 out of the 30 teams saw an attendance increase this year. If that becomes a trend, we should see more of a popularity distribution among the teams. It'll first be seen in the bleachers, and then on the screen. However, we still have yet to see if the rise in attendance is a trend or just a fluke. We do know that the ratings decline is a trend. They've tried to fix it, but it just keeps getting worse. Maybe next year's World Series matchup will be Yankees versus Dodgers or Red Sox versus Cubs or something like that. Ratings will hit at least a 5-year high, and everyone will forget about the ratings problem for a little while. But don't be fooled. The viewership problem can't be solved by always having one or two of the most widely followed teams in MLB in the World Series every year. You have to look at the reality that a Yankees-Dodgers World Series right now would get lower ratings than it would have gotten 10 years ago. Same for a Diamondbacks-Rangers World Series 10 years ago. Ratings would have been low, but not this low. So, for the question I asked in the title of this video, is MLB thriving or dying? Can't answer that. We'll have to wait till next year. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.